Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Daily Tech Show. I'm your host, John Myer. This week, we're speaking with public cloud leaders and experts around multi-cloud. What are their thoughts? Is it worth implementing a multiple cloud solution? What does the public sector think about this so-called multi-cloud? I've asked leading experts on why they would use multi-cloud, and here's what some of them had to say. You don't wake up one morning and say, I think I'll start using multiple cloud providers. Or enterprises aren't using multi-cloud for reasons that they think they are. And the last one, data transfer costs are real. Stick around because you won't want to miss what they have to say on multi-cloud and does it really work? Before we bring on the next guest, don't forget to hit that like, subscribe, and the notification button because we have more content on the way. In the previous episodes, I used Google's definition for multi-cloud, but I'm going to define it in my own way. I'd say enterprises are using multiple public cloud providers for their unique services. Now, personally, I'm not a big fan of multi-cloud or think it's a good idea, but there are reasons on why you would utilize different cloud providers. Example, using AWS for their machine learning capabilities, but hosting their Exchange servers environment in Azure. Or maybe they acquired a company that was utilizing another cloud provider, and now they have to integrate with it. Don't select multiple cloud providers to save on costs or vendor lock, because in the end, you'll be paying a lot more to support the environment or to use their services. If you're interested in listening to the other public cloud leaders of multi-cloud, take a look up here. All right, now it's time to bring on a regular guest of the show, Liyang Sun, CEO and founder of Sun Creative Services, who will give us his thoughts on multi-cloud in the public sector. Liyang, thanks for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you, John, for inviting me again. I don't know if I'm a regular per se, but I'm certainly am been here for a couple times. And I really appreciate again the offer for you to talk to me and get my thoughts about the topic of today.
So, Liyang, how about we say you'll be a regular on the show? That way we'll just put it out there.
Sure. I'll be a regular for the show. Whatever you want, John, let me know. I'm happy to be a part of it.
Don't mean to put you on the spot, but I know you have no problem with it.
No, I don't. I really don't.
All right. So, Liyang, before we jump into our topic of multi-cloud, how about you give the audience a little bit about yourself, your company, and the type of enterprise companies or governments you work with? Because I think hearing how the public sector is handling our topic today will be very interesting.
Sure. So my company is Sun Creative Services. It's founded by me in 2020. You can find the information probably in the link that John will share. If not, it's suncreativesvc.com. So it's already down. See, John's already gotten taken care of. This is why I love joining your show, John, because you have everything taken care of. So I'm really grateful for that. So anyways, my company was founded because I've seen through my over 15 years of experience in the private and public sector serving clients and customers that data is the next big thing, just like the internet was back in the early 90s. And so I want a piece of the action. I want to be able to help our customers and clients get a piece of the action too. And my company itself is formed to be able to allow our clients to be able to unlock and tap into the true power of the data by turning it from a liability into an asset to enable increased transparency, accountability, security, and sustainability. And my clients right now are the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administrations, the FDA, as well as Fannie Mae. There's the three specific customer bases that I'm focused on at this early stage of my company, founding in 2020, actually late 2020. I have not had a chance to grow it into the billion-dollar company that I aspire to be, kind of like the background I have here, but I want to be there. So that's where I'm at.
Liyang, big things for you in the future and your company. I really appreciate your insight. Just because you founded your company in late 2020, you have a lot of experience here in the public sector. My question with you is, what are your thoughts on multi-cloud? Do you think it's really worth it? Is it very successful? And what are you seeing in the public sector?
That's a great question, John. And before we get started, let me just make sure that we're talking about the same thing and define multi-cloud. So for me, my understanding, and you can tell me this is your understanding or if you heard from other folks, is that if you use two or more public clouds, and we're talking about the big cloud players like Amazon, AWS, Google, or Azure from Microsoft, we're not talking about any of the other smaller companies if they come up. If you use two or more of those public clouds together, along with whatever on-premise or even not an on-premise strategy that you have, then that's considered multi-cloud. Is that the right understanding that you have?
Yeah. So, Liyang, okay. Spot on to my definition and introduction to the podcast here is about multi-cloud. And I really utilize in the beginning of our current other recordings, what I did is I defined it using Google, and then I created my own definition based off all the conversations we came up. It was literally a one sentence. I had to summarize it. But yeah, when we talk about multi-cloud, everybody thinks of the top three. I want to say like the big three, AWS, Azure, and GCP. There are others out there. I am partial to AWS, but in this whole entire conversation, I'm not really talking about AWS specific, and I'm not selling anything. I'm bringing that conversational piece to see if multi-cloud is really worth it for enterprise companies, and what are some of the recommendations from leading public cloud experts like yourself.
That's great. That's awesome. What was the question again? So now that we've defined multi-cloud, my mind is in the cloud, right? Both in the literal sense and a figurative sense, in that all my stuff that I'm trying to do and all my schedule is all up in the cloud and stored in the cloud. And I'm thinking out of the box in the cloud too. So I apologize if I forget what we're talking about at some point.
Oh man, wait. Is your mind in multiple clouds?
Yes, perhaps. Yeah.
Okay. No, dude, don't worry about it. This is why I love this show. We have a lot of fun. Okay. So really, what are you seeing in the public sector? Are you seeing them utilize multiple cloud providers? Yep. Is it really worth it? And have you seen it be implemented successfully? Or is it just because they acquired another sector and now they have to incorporate it into their everyday lives and enterprise?
Perfect. So your question, if I understand it correctly, is what have I seen in the clients that I've interfaced with in terms of cloud usage and for multi-cloud? And I'll start with the ones that I know. Fannie Mae is the one that I know most well because I have the most experience working with them and helping them define, advance their cloud strategy and transformation. For them, they're using multi-cloud. They have a combination of Google. They're not leveraging Google as much when I left, but mostly it's Azure and also AWS. And so for them, it's worked really well in conjunction with their on-prem activities. As you can imagine, in the financial services industry, speed is of critical importance, and stability is of critical importance. So safety soundness is the mantra that was a pillar for the strategy in Fannie Mae for a very long time, and still is to this date. And so the key on people's mind is, can we get redundancy? Can we get the level of reliability from our software and applications should something goes down? And that's why they use multi-clouds, to be able to replicate some of their workloads, to be able to provide higher availability and redundancy in case of failure. But they also leverage the different work clouds, because for Azure, as you're well aware, it's great for Microsoft services. And so a lot of Fannie Mae's work processes and applications are leveraging Microsoft products, including MS Teams for video conferencing, for chats, for collaboration, and so forth. And behind that, of course, it's SharePoint and all the Power BI and all the cool stuff that leverages it. AWS is primarily leveraged for their applications, and I won't be able to disclose more than just say that what they're focused on, and I'm sure what a lot of companies are focused on, is how can we take some of our on-prem legacy environments and move it to the cloud and build it in a way we don't cripple our current existing business processes, but at the same time, we have a good way of interfacing between the cloud stuff and the stuff that's on-prem. Because it's not like, small companies like mine, where we're cloud native from the birth of our company, because we have the ability and the luxury to be able to do that. The other older companies and established companies have more of a history and legacy. So as you are well aware, the audience is well aware, they cannot just do that. So that's one. For NOAA, it's actually a very different story, and FDA, the two other clients that I know of, really very well. Both of them are on their cloud journey, but they're a lot slower than Fannie Mae or even some of the private sector companies. For them, and I would imagine and equate them to large billion-dollar companies, who have been founded in the late 1800s and early 1900s, such as big companies like Boeing and Lockheed and so forth. They have a lot of history, even more so than Fannie Mae. And so for them, a lot of things are established. Plus, they don't want to mess things up. That is the most important thing, that they don't want, even more so than Fannie Mae. They don't want to mess anything up. And not to mention they have a very mature workforce that they got to train on a lot of these new tools and things that the people just, that naturally change management goes hand in hand with all these cloud and new services. And that is a very, very hairy beast to tackle. I'm sure we'll talk about another time. But for NOAA, they're using also multi-cloud as well, in the sense that they leverage heavily Google for their enterprise capabilities, like emails and conference video conferencing calls like this, calendars and so forth. But they also leverage AWS in the sense that they're experimenting with new capabilities, and Microsoft Azure as well for not surprisingly, Microsoft products. So the big and same thing at FTA, where they don't leverage Google per se for their environments. And it's been a while since I've actually been deeply embedded in the tech stacks and technology space in FTA, but they are leveraging multiple clouds as I know it now, because they want to make sure that they don't just have one egg. They don't have all their eggs in one basket. And hence, that's another reason why you, and I'm sure the viewers know why people choose to go with multi-cloud. Because one, if you go with multi-cloud, then you're probably more established and you're bigger and you have the clout and the money and the weight to be able to leverage this stuff. Because if you're a small company, you can't afford to be able to test an environment in multiple environments, multiple clouds, and train people up to be able to use multiple environments like that. So these bigger companies have the money and the ability to spend on training on people and maintaining these presence. And they also want to make sure that they're replicating their workload or splitting their workloads efficiently across different clouds, so that they're getting not only the biggest bang for the bucks, but the most stable bang for the bucks.
So, Liyang, I have to touch on a bunch of things that you've mentioned. I took a couple quick notes. Now, in our previous ones, we talked about going to multi-cloud, not for the cost, not for worry of vendor lock. There are other reasons why you go: licensing. So you think Microsoft Azure, there's going to be some licensing tied to it, and you can do your whole entire company. But you mentioned going to these multiple cloud environments, and you called out some specifics, like going to Azure for their unique services versus going to AWS for their application. That's actually one of the biggest and driving factors that you should utilize multi-cloud, is going to them for unique services that benefit your company and applications for success. Don't go over to multi-cloud for, okay, I'm a fear of vendor lock, because what's going to happen is you're going to end up spending more money. You're going to spend more time for training. You're going to spend so much in it. One of the things that I actually want to touch on, because of your background and really you want to get, your piece of the pie for the data, you see data is big, is those data transfer costs. Are these companies experiencing huge amounts of data transfer costs, and are they okay with it? Or have they figured out a way to minimize the communication between multiple cloud providers?
Yeah, the answer is yes, and yes, John. But no to the have they figured out the transfer costs, right? So it's the former where you're saying, do these guys experience these kind of costs? And it's yes, and yes. And I won't be able to disclose more details. But what I can share is that in terms of transfer costs, I mean, once you have something established and you want to make changes, there's just rippling implications everywhere. And so a lot of these times, these decisions are made years in the making, and especially in the federal government, where procurements of this size last 2 to 3 years in advance. And plus, it takes a year or two of negotiation. You just saw the JEDI program that got canceled now, finally, putting to bed some of the arguments. This happened.
We'll see if that's been put to bed. They might have canceled it, but I highly doubt. I feel that it's not dead yet. And not saying that they haven't picked a cloud provider, but I don't feel that the JEDI, I think the JEDI is going to come back as a new term and a different one. And it might be actually fair and square between all the public cloud providers. Who knows? But let's get back on the topic of the data, because I find that the data cost and the data transfer cost is something that you can't accurately calculate because I imagine that the public sector is gathering so much data and retaining so much data that it's probably like 5 times the amount daily as it grows over time.
It's a lot. It's a lot. Now, the benefit of working in the public sector is that all the data, at least in the federal government, US federal government, is free and available unless there is some sort of confidentiality or security issue for them to release this kind of knowledge. That stuff is all publicly available to us as taxpayers on data.gov, on USA Spending, a lot of different websites that provide that. And so the data itself is not the key issue in terms of getting access to the data. The challenge is once you have the data and once the data is ported over to the different applications, different clouds rather, what do they do with it and how do you utilize it? And the stuff that's built with it, how is that used by either the agency, customers, either public, us as normal USA as citizens, or as private companies who are looking to do business with the federal government? That is the key. And right now, it's really literally the wild, wild west, where yes, and the government has established certain rules and regulations to say you must be able to provide your data to GSA. You must be able to have them publicly available. You must be able to hire chief data officers and so forth. But these regulations are only as good as how fast the individual agency can move and the people within it can move. Yep. And a lot of times it takes a very, very long time for these regulations to actually be enacted and truly actually take a shape.
Very interesting, Leon. Now, Liyang, I've got a couple more minutes here, and I want to ask you a really specific question. Previously, I've actually asked some of these public cloud leaders, can they give us their insights, or maybe if a company wants to move to a multiple cloud environment, what are some of the common mistakes? But I want to flip that because you're telling me that the public sector has successfully implemented multi-cloud. What are some of the positive or some of the learning experiences that you can share if a company wants to implement multi-cloud?
I don't know if well, we can probably get into arguments of what a successful implemented means, but
does it work?
Yeah, it works. So it works, and it's the people behind it that actually helps make it work, right? Yeah. But in terms of some success stories and some things that I can share, I can point you to the success story of NOAA implementing Google as a platform. And I can talk about that because I was actually there when they flipped the switch and turned everything from Outlook and being driven by Exchange to Google back in 2011 or 2012, where they actually implemented that piece. And that was a success story and before that happened, all the different line offices within NOAA, which is like the business units of a bigger organization that is NOAA, they're leveraging their email server and calendar applications using Exchange, but on the front end, they basically said, each different organization have the ability to manage your own email clients. So you've got Thunderbird being out there. You've got remember that term, Thunderbird?
I remember that, man. I was a huge Mozilla fan.
I love that.
And when Thunderbird came out, I will not tell you what year I used it. We'll just keep going on.
So anyways, so there's just a bunch of chaos, right? Because it's not fully managed. With Google in implementation, NOAA actually took the initiative to actually lead the effort and drive it and say, we must use Google and let's use it in our native web clients. And if you can't use web clients, we have to go with Microsoft. So we've got to go with the Outlook because otherwise it's just too many different versions of the clients for us to support. And herein lies some of the challenges that cause people to move to the cloud and leverage the cloud to solve some of the challenges rather, is that there's a bunch of different versions out there. We got to consolidate and we got to simplify it down to one thing and one thing only. It's kind of like how we have multiple calendars. You want it all in one calendar so we can see it all, everything. That is, for the government, that is the biggest driver on all the different things that you see in terms of consolidation of contract schedules, consolidation of cloud and infrastructure and so forth. So that was a success story in that before they infrastructure and for emails was scattered and calendar scattered, and afterwards they leveraged Google to be able to utilize Google for their calendar and email and so forth, all in an integrated fashion. And it's worked very, very well. And Noah's been using that. Even now today, when I interface with some of my clients now at Noah, they use Google Meet. They're very proficient with it. So it's really good. Now, there are, does that answer your question?
Yeah, Liyang, that was actually very interesting. A very specific customer use case, which really resonates with the audience because it's not an example. It's actually walking through the process. Now, I'm almost out of time, but I have one last question for you before we wrap it up. What advice would you give a company that would like to go to multi-cloud or use a multi-cloud approach?
I think the most important piece that I give in terms of advice to either my clients, my potential clients and customers, or my friends is that you got to focus on the people. You got to focus on the people. Technology is the easy thing because all the solutions are out there. And you know this, I know this, and our viewers should probably know this. All the use cases, all the coding, people rarely code specific codes anymore unless they're custom code that you want to write or somebody's interested. Everything's on GitHub. Everything is on already defined for you in AWS. And I'm sure Google and Microsoft have similar treasure troves of these codes to be able to utilize them and leverage them wherever they see fit in terms of architecture, design, and so forth. It's the people that is important because technology exists to serve the people. And gone are the days where you build it and they come, right? We have to design the systems and solutions and architect the solutions, regardless if it's multi-cloud, single cloud, private cloud, public cloud, hybrid, whatever terminology you want to throw in there. You have to design it for a case of how people can use it. And the most important thing is to move to the left all of the change management and the risk management component of people and their fears and their hesitations and all the stuff that they experience and they go through to the left. We talk about DevOps and security and moving everything to the left there. DevSecOps is, I think, is now the new term, right?
I just posted about that DevSecOps.
You just defined, right?
Somebody help me define it.
But it's the same concept. We need to move the people component to the front too, right? Because unless you get people involved and define the business process and get buy-in, help them understand what this is all about, without those champions and those people advocating for your projects or efforts or initiatives and programs, your program is doomed to fail. No matter what benefits you can show on paper, no matter how much you can convince leadership, if the leadership buys in, but your team, your people refuse to do it, there is no way you're going to be successful.
And I talked about this before, is we should be working on a bottom-up approach, not a top-down approach. All right, Liyang, real quick, everybody, if you like what you see, do not forget to hit that like, subscribe, the notification. Also, drop some comments down below. We have more content on the way. Remember, it's a week-long series on multi-cloud, and I'm interviewing a ton of public leaders and experts. Liyang, thank you so much for joining me on the show, and I can't wait till next time.
Thank you. Same here. I look forward to all the other things you're going to be posting because this is how I learn from watching you and watching you interact with leaders. So thank you very much for this.
Thank you, Liyang. I really appreciate it.
Okay. Bye.